18. All right, give this another minute. And a reminder, if you get yourself a Kahoot account and log in through the app, you retain access to the Kahoots for a week or two, which is more than enough. Other than that, this is a one shot. You don't get to see them again. And another reminder, Kahoots are a good way to study. A better way to study is my review sheets. They have all of the answers. It's almost unethical what I did. But students still don't get 100% all the time, so I haven't gotten in trouble. All right. Justin Trudeau, hey. Welcome, the President of Canada. Nice. Got better hair than either of our past two presidents. Okay, this is pretty easy. There's a lot of right answers here. And yet a quarter of the class almost still randomly chose the only wrong answer. Why can't they increase RPM and torque? Because if you increase RPM and torque at the same time, that's increasing power, which we can't do. Neither can we decrease RPM and torque at the same. Well, I mean, you can't put a brake in there, but no gear set reduces them both at the same time either. There's a picture of a simple, inexpensive. No, not a wheel. But that's okay. Not everybody passes this course. Ah, good. Fortunately, I didn't put a wheel as one of the options. English question for you. What do we say they do? We say they mesh together. They sheesh together. They fresh together. They mesh together. All right. The drive gear. Absolutely. Yep, and then the driven. Some simple questions here, but they're gears. They're not that complicated. Do they turn in the same direction? Opposite direction? Yeah, there is one exception to that. Anybody remember it from the beginning of the lecture? A spur gear that turns both of them in the same direction of rotation? That internal spur gear, absolutely. That internal spur gear. And, I suppose you could say this question's a bit ambiguous, wrong because of that, but 99.9% of the spur gears you will see are external spur gears. All right, well, Aiden, if this is scaring you, please remember, put this in perspective. How much difference in the general scheme of life does your score on a Kahoot test from level 2 at BCIT really make? None. Ha! Exactly. It makes no difference. Here is where it's so much easier if you just draw it. It's hard to remember that. It's actually hard to remember that formula. I had to figure the darn thing out when I was getting ready to teach this. I was stressing out over how to teach it, and then I figured out the trick. Just draw it. If you draw it, it's pretty simple. Okay. Ooh, ooh. This has not gone well. If the gear on the right is the driven gear, so this is drive, and this is driven. This is the input. This is the output. This is going to turn once. This will turn 5 times, right? So it will increase RPM. And if you increase the RPM, you must decrease the torque. Oh, look, those are my 2 answers. All right. Okay, in the test center, when you take your test on Thursday, I don't know about level 1 tests, but I know in level 2 tests, it is rare, very rare for students to run out of time. And if you find yourself running out of time, all you need to do is ask me and you will get more time. I have never told a student that we're going to enforce the 1 hour time limit and they don't get more time. If you feel that you need more time in the test center, just ask me and you'll get more time. So take your time with these questions. I would much rather have the AME who works on my airplane get it right than be the first one done. The test time is limited to an hour, but I will always give you more time if you want. So it is limited, and the way we've written them, they're limited, but I will give you more if you want it. So, and for some students, they just read a little bit slower. More time. Okay. My guess is you won't use it, but email me separately, so I'll pass that along to Annie, and I will. Okay, this one maybe needed a little bit more time. Just draw it out. The bigger you make, and it's a little bit tough on the wording, which will decrease the output torque. So if we make this one bigger and bigger and bigger, we'll get more and more speed, which means we'll get less and less torque on the output. All right. Aiden, have I got you with me? Or am I leaving you confused. Or anybody else, in fact. Not to pick on Aiden, but you said you were falling a little bit behind. If I make this bigger, and this is the drive, high speed is low torque, yes. Yeah. If you've got a certain amount of power, like say you've got on your bicycle. We always talk bicycles. Every instructor I know picks a bicycle because we all kind of know a bicycle. If you're going to put a certain amount of power into the pedals, you could put yourself into a low gear and climb a steep hill. That's going to put a lot of torque to the rear wheel to push your bicycle and your body weight and everything up that steep hill, but it's going to be a low speed. That's high torque and low speed. If you're going on the level or slightly downhill, you can then drop the torque and trade your torque for speed and put the same amount of power out at the pedals. Does that explanation work for you, Braden? All right. Yes, high torque is low speed, and low and high speed is lower torque. Ooh, I didn't talk about these. What is this gear called? I forgot to talk about this kind of gear. We call it an idler gear. And it's worth noting that the number of teeth on this idler gear is totally irrelevant. It's still input and output. So output number of teeth versus input number of teeth. You could do input to idler, idler to output, and do the math all the way along, but it really doesn't matter because basically when this tooth here pushes one tooth up, this thing moves it around, and one tooth comes down here. So the number of teeth on this gear is totally irrelevant. But what it does do that's kind of cool if you wanted it is this is going to turn clockwise, this will turn counterclockwise, and then this one will turn once again clockwise. So we end up with the same direction of rotation, input to output, if you want. Or you could use that internal square gear. Oh, and Sean, you said torque is a resisting force. Torque is not a resisting force. Torque is a twisting force. They're cheap. Cheap, that's why we like them. So Sean, don't get that mixed up. Torque is not resistance. When I put torque on when the brakes hit, that's a resisting. When I rev the engine, that is not a resisting. That's just a twisting force going to the wheels. Is that, yeah, because they're cheap. That's why they're the most common, because they're cheap. And as a world, we like things that are cheap. I mean, if they're effective, we like them if they're cheap. Okay, alternating tooth angles. I always get a kick out of that. Alternating tooth angles would look to me like, give myself a pencil. That would be teeth. This is worse. This is horrible. Let's see, Grace. Good annotations. And go back to here. Alternating tooth angles to me sounds like a gear that is drawn like. Do I have this thing going here? No, I don't. Wrong one. A gear that has teeth that look like this. Imagine a gear with teeth that look like that. No, we want herringbone. Yeah, a zipper isn't going to mesh real well. We want herringbone. Okay, so back to my screen share. Here we go. Yes, they are high strength. They're better, they're stronger, and they're quieter. But they're expensive, and they have this induced thrust problem. How would I choose a bevel gear? To change the plane of rotation. Very good. I love it when that happens. Everybody get it right. Wow, it's windy out there. The worm is always the drive gear. Always, always the drive gear. Watch the that video link I've got to the Lego. Okay, so this will be a test question, something like this. Which gives you the lowest output RPM? Well, look at this. If I've got a 4-to-1, that means my engine is turning at 4,000 RPM and my propeller is turning at 1,000 RPM. You can see, I hope, that that would be the other way around. That would be lower than the 1.5 to 1. Do I need to explain it further? Is there anybody stuck? Can you see a 4-to-1 is going to be my deepest reduction? You need me to explain a little bit more. Okay, so the ratio is input RPM to output RPM. So you need to get down to a common denominator to compare them effectively. Oh, 1 to 5.1? Okay. So if I've got a 4-to-1 versus a 1.5 to 1, which is my obviously my deepest, my most common wrong answer, in the orange, I'm going to turn my engine at 4,000 RPM and the propeller will turn at 1,000 RPM. In the green, my engine only needs to turn 1,500 RPM to get 1,000 RPM. Does that make sense, Aiden, Isaac? It's the ratio. It's describing the ratio of the RPMs. So 4,000 RPM divided by 4, it's input to output. Yeah. Aiden, does it make sense for you? And then the other ones, I think on the test, it goes a little bit more complex. It's going to give you a slightly more complicated, like the 3-2, and you just need to be able to compare it down to a 1-to-1, or down to a to one kind of ratio. So make a note that you can. Ooh, there is a question like this, but you'd have more time. Okay, so how do you tackle a question like this if it comes up on the test? How do I do this? Let's go. How are we going to do this? So we've got, the question was, shoot, where'd that go? The question asked, a 60-tooth gear is being driven by a 12-tooth gear. So let's draw this. I've got a 60-tooth gear is being driven by a 12-tooth gear. And the 12-tooth gear, say that 5 times fast, the 12-tooth gear is turning at, so this is my input and this is my output. This is turning at 150 RPM. So what is my reduction ratio? Which one is turning faster, input or output? Is this speeding things up or slowing them down? The input is faster, it is slowing things down, correct? Okay, and what is the ratio? Every time how many turns of the 12? Right, 5-to-1. Have I got you with us, everybody with me on why we're at 5-to-1? Sean, it is not 1-to-5, it is 5-to-1. Remember, we do output over input. 60 over 12 equals 5. Does that make sense? Because the input turns faster. Input turns 5, output turns 1. Okay? So what's 150 divided by 5? I think there's 1 or 2 questions. You'll probably get like 1 question like this on the test. It asks you to calculate an output RPM. Input over output. So input over output RPM. But when you do the calculation, it's output over input for the gear teeth. We want, like, the 5-to-1 is my gear ratio. But to calculate it, I need to do output over input. Because if I do it the other way, and it's fairly obvious, if you do it the other way, I would get a 1-to-5. But you can look at this and see, no, that's not right. It's got to be 5-to-1. You see that? You've got the right numbers, but they're in the wrong order. And that's why I like to sketch it. I couldn't get my head around it until I sketched it. And then it was easy. So please, when this question comes up on the test, have a piece of paper and a pencil and draw the gears. Just about everybody gets it when they draw the gears. And at best, 30% of the class gets it when you just try and memorize. All right, are we good? Okay, back to my Kahoot. Okay, looks like most of you got it right. 36 over 20, output over input to get the, okay, and then you could reduce it. And a few of you are still seeing, you just got to remember that the gear teeth goes inverse from the RPM. The one with the least teeth, the one on the output side, for the number of teeth, it's got to go in front for the RPMs. Remember, I said there's two things you need to remember about planetary gear sets. There are 3 elements to a planetary gear set. How many of them rotate? And how many of them are held steady? ACK. Okay. Rotating elements. What is the number of rotating elements? We've got 3 elements. We've got the ring gear, we've got the sun gear, and we got the planet with the spider. Always one of them is held steady, and 2 of them are allowed to rotate. Well, it can be any way. You can hold the ring and have the planets and the sun turn. You can hold the sun. In this case, they're saying the sun is held steady and the planets in the ring turn. When you watch that video, you see they can play around with it and they can hold whichever one they want, and the other 2 will make a gear train. Only 2 things you got to remember. And how many? And what's the minimum number of gears here? 5. We could have 6 or 7. Like you could have a planet set with more than 3, but you're going to have at least 3. The thing's not going to work right. And of these elements, 2 will always be allowed to turn and 1 will be held steady. Think about it. If you didn't, the whole thing would just turn as a great big spinning, and it wouldn't be in anything. It wouldn't be a gear. It would just be a... Yeah, don't think of each planet as an element. All the planets count as 1. Thank you, Nathan. That's a good way to explain it. That's what I've been trying to say. Think of all the planets as 1 element combined. All right, well, Superan, it's sad. This is going to haunt you for the rest of the hour, maybe. A whole hour ruined. Yeah, day maybe. If it haunts you your whole day, you still need to find something better to do with your day. Yeah, we'll usually use them on the propeller output shaft, and interestingly enough, the picture even shows that. Look. Crankshaft, that's the engine, and propeller. There we go. And what are we doing? Are we speeding up our propeller or slowing it down? Slowing it down. That allows the engine to turn at a faster RPM. Why do we turn the engine at a faster RPM? More power, not more efficiency, Sean. More efficiency happens in your car when you turn the engine at a lower RPM, because every time the engine makes a spin around, it takes a little bit of energy to do that. So we actually lose some efficiency. Like driving around in second gear all day, you'd have tons of power. Yeah, you lean the mixture out when you get to high altitude. Yeah, exactly. Nathan, not quite. When we get to high altitude, there's not much oxygen up there because the air is so thin. And if we put in more gas, nothing happens because the limit wasn't our gasoline. The limit was not enough oxygen. So as Kang says, yeah, well, even in cars, you need more gas. You also need more air. That's why we put on turbochargers. Turbochargers don't add gas, they add air. Superchargers, same thing. Supersonic speeds at the blade tips. Yeah, supersonic speeds at the blade tips is why we would probably spin our airplane engines faster if we could, but the blade tips go supersonic. All right, let's see who wins the all-important first Kahoot of week 2. OHM 425. Nice. Okay. Let's go. All right. I think we still have got bearings to do. I got another whole PowerPoint to go through, but I think this would be a good break point to maybe take